So I guess it is time to begin. Welcome to another installment of the book of Revelation. Tonight we were in chapter 14. It is Wednesday evening, March the 22nd, 2023. I got a Facebook message this past week from a lady whose daughter is a member here at West Huntsville. She said, my daughter has a phone number that people have offered her money for. She said the last three digits are 666. So if you're ever around, I did not get permission to say her name, so I'm not going to tell you who it is. But if you're ever around here, you better be wearing a necklace that has a cross on it. To the learned, 666 is a 666. I'm getting in a bad habit. 666 is the number of a person. It is the number of a man. And it turns out to be one of the first major clues as to who the villain of the book of Revelation is. To the unwashed masses, 666 is satanic. It is spooky. It is scary. It is superstition. It's like walking beneath a ladder or your paths crossing with a black cat or having to deal with the number 13 on an elevator. There is a verse that says the truth shall set you free. Well, in this case, that is definitely true. Okay, what's coming up in chapter 14 tonight? We have something very interesting to do. It's the very last verse of chapter 14, so we have some verses to go through before we get there, but I think you're going to enjoy this. It is a revelation characteristic that I think you're going to like. Tonight we're going to be seeing another behavior characteristic, yet another behavior characteristic of walking in the light. We may have a go back concerning this talking image, speaking image from chapter 13. Chapter 14 actually gives us just a little bit more information, so we may have to go back and modify exactly what that speaking image is. When Revelation means gospel, it's going to say gospel. And then we may have another clue as to the identity of the villain of Revelation. Okay, so tonight we're going to have Mark Bailey read for us. There are no paintings, there are no pictures for chapter 14. For some reason, the lady never got around to 14, so there's no pictures for this chapter. Okay, Mark, go ahead, please.
Then I looked, and behold, a Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, like the voice of many waters, and like the voice of loud thunder. And I heard the sound of harpists playing their harps. They sang, as it were, a new song before the throne, before the four living creatures and the elders, and no one could learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. These are the ones who were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed from among men, being firstfruits to God and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no deceit, for they are without fault before the throne of God. Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and springs of water. And another angel followed, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If anyone worships the beast and his image, and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Then I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, Write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors and their works follow them. Then I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and on the cloud sat one like the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, Thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time has come for you to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. So he who sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. Then another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar, who had power over fire, and he cried with a loud cry to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust in your sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. So the angel thrust his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trampled outside the city, and the blood came out of the winepress up to the horses' bridles for 1,600 furlongs.
Okay, thank you. There's a lot in this chapter. We're not going to cover near all of it. I would like to make a few observations and then get to this 1,600 furlongs business. One interesting question that this chapter answers is, could a saint get away, a saint from the first century, could he get away with bowing the knee to Caesar, get the certificate so it saved his life, and then continue worshiping God and still be saved, still be okay? There are 3 verses I would like for us to look at very fast. One is in chapter 14, verse 5. It says, and in their mouth was found no guile. If you look up this word guile, you're going to find one of the definitions is duplicity. There was no duplicity in their mouth, which means they weren't trying to worship 2 different gods. Chapter 14, verses 9 through 11 says, if any man worship the beast, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God without mixture. That means it's not going to be diluted. And the smoke from their torment ascends up forever, and they will have no rest day or night. So if Rome came knocking at my door and said, okay, you don't have your certificate, it's time for you to bow the knee. Can I bow the knee and then get forgiveness and be okay? It looks like the answer to that question is no. One more verse that let's look at this right quick. Who worship the beast and his image. That's talking about the speaking idol, the speaking image from chapter 13. Who worship the beast and his image. Now, before we said that the idol was possibly the law forcing these people to worship Caesar. This verse throws a little bit more light. It says, worship the beast and his image. It makes me think that perhaps that image may have actually been an idol. If you will look at countries like Thailand, I'm picking on Thailand a lot because they're Buddhist. If you look at Thailand, you will find Buddhist statues everywhere. I mean, you can't go anywhere without seeing one. Some of them are huge. So these people could worship Buddha anytime they want to. Was there actually idols? Were there actually idols around Rome, around the Roman Empire, so that you could worship the image of the Caesar or someone in high in power? I don't know the answer to that. But that is another possibility, another possible explanation for this image. It may have not only been the law, it may have actually been a literal statue, a literal image of Caesar. We're going to move forward to chapter 20. Chapter 20, verse 4 says, "And I saw the souls of those who were beheaded for the witness of Jesus, for the word of God, which had not worshipped the beast." There's 3 verses there that tell me that you're not going to make it to heaven if you bow the knee to any god besides the God of heaven. And if you do that just to save your life, not good enough reason. What are your thoughts on that? Any comment on that? Do you see that the same way I'm seeing it? One of the revelation characteristics that I think I'm going to skip tonight, I'm not going to do it because I want to get to this other one instead. It gets into a verse which talks about being faithful to the point of even dying if you have to die. There are several verses throughout Revelation that talks about that. You're going to be thrown into prison. You're going to go through tribulation. You're going to be beheaded possibly. You're going to be killed. You're going to be put into prison. Your kids are going to be taken away from you and made wards of the state. But even so, don't you bow the knee. So it looks like the answer to that question is no. Not going to be able to. Verse 6, "And I saw another angel in the midst of heaven having an everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation, kindred, and tongue, and people." Well, what's interesting about that verse? What's interesting about that verse is when the book of Revelation means gospel, it will say gospel. The book of Revelation knows the Greek word for gospel. This word it uses is found 41 times in the New Testament. Why is that important? Back in chapter 5, we have a scroll that is rolled up and has 7 seals on the outside, and some people claim that that's the gospel. Well, if that was the literal gospel, Revelation would have probably said it was. Instead, it looks more like a last will and testament. Now, what's the difference between a last will and testament and the gospel? There's probably not much. But there is apparently some distinction between those two. When Revelation wants to talk about the gospel, it will actually use that Greek word and say gospel when it means it. "And there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication." 2 notes on this. We're going to get into this very heavily when we get to chapter 18. This is, I'm not even sure why it's even mentioned in 14. 18 pretty much covers that topic. This word made is actually, it may have been good in 1611, but when we see the word made, we think of being forced to do something. We are made to do something. The actual Greek word is potizo. It means to cause someone to do something or to give something to someone to do something. So made, in today's language, made might be just a little bit too strong, because we're going to find out that in chapter 18, the kings of the earth, that's what all these people are called who are cooperating with the villain of Revelation. We're going to find that these guys are not going to get off scot-free either. They enabled the villain. They encouraged the villain. They facilitated the villain to do whatever they were doing. There is no historic proof that I know of that these kings of the earth, as mentioned in chapter 17 and 18, ever persecuted the church. There's no evidence, there's no proof. But yet they're not going to get away with what they did because they enabled. They enabled the villain. The villain didn't necessarily force them to do anything. They did it of free will. This word fornication, it shows up 12 times in the book of Revelation. And this will be the last time I mention this. I mentioned it in chapter 9 because in chapter 9 it was literal. Chapter 14, 17, 18, and 19, it is always used figuratively. So be careful when you start trying to figure out, is it literal or is it figurative? From 14 on, it's probably figurative. Chapter 9, it is definitely literal. It is found 3 times in chapter 12, and I have no clue if that's figurative or literal. You could argue both ways. So that'll be something that you can figure out on your own. I don't have an opinion one way or the other about chapter 2. That word, it could be literal, it could be figurative. I suspect it's probably figurative, but I can't prove it either way. Okay, if we have time, we'll come back to that. Let's talk about songs for a minute. I like to pick on songwriters sometimes. I noticed back when I was attending here, the first time I was here, that a song was sung and the slides were put up, and your slides are actually already modified for this song. Chapter 14, verses 14 and 16, it says, "And I look, and behold, a white cloud, and upon that cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown and a sharp sickle. And he that sat on the cloud thrust his sickle into the earth, and the earth was reaped." That's an analogy to the second coming of Jesus. Revelation chapter 1, verse 7, we've already talked about this. He will come with clouds, and everyone will see him, including those who pierced his side. Mark 13:26, "And they shall see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory." That entire paragraph area around these verses deals with the second coming. So what is the song? "On that bright and cloudless morning when the dead in Christ shall rise and the glory of his resurrection share." I noticed your slides are actually modified. It says, "On that bright and joyous morning." And I think I may have made this comment before. If that's a cloudless morning, we are in big trouble. Because when Jesus comes to collect his saints, he's going to be sitting in a cloud surrounded by clouds. Okay, I flew through those kind of fast. Any comments on any of that before we get to the 1600? Pretty straightforward chapter. Pretty straightforward. Okay, let's have some fun, shall we? "And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horse bridles, and by the space of 1,600 furlongs." If you look at that Greek word furlongs, it's actually stadia. Stadia is a Greek and Roman measurement. A furlong is, let's see, is it stadia or furlong? One of them is 9/10 of the other. So it's close, but not exactly. Now, this is obviously talking about the judgment of these people. But let me show you for the remaining time we have, because that may be how long it takes. Let's talk about what premillennialists do with that verse, okay? So there's your verse again. It is 600. A stadia is 600 feet to the Greek. It's 625 feet to the Romans. It's a Greek standard of measurement for running the races like the Olympics. Okay? Okay. Just that verse. We have the winepress pressing out the grapes. The liquid goes out a space of 1,600 furlongs, 1,600 stadia, and it's 5 feet deep. What can we do with that figure? Let me show you what premillennialists do with it. Okay, let's assume this is a river. Let's assume you're pressing down the wine press, and it's creating a river of grape juice. In this case, they're saying blood, okay? It's creating a river of blood, okay? Now, we know that we know in this particular case, it's the people who are going to be lost, okay? So what can we do with that? Well, if it's going out 600 furlongs and it's 5 feet deep, we have a three-dimensional object here, don't we? If we can figure out how much human blood how many humans it takes to contribute to that kind of volume, then we're going to have a pretty good estimate of how many people are going to be lost. Just from that one verse. Let me show you what I mean. We have a river running 1,600 furlongs, and it's up to the horse's bridle. Horse's bridle is going to be somewhere 4 to 6 feet high. Just for the sake of being fair, let's just take the average. Let's take the average of 5, okay? Now, it's just geometry. We've got one small problem, though. We don't know the width. And the premillennialist site that I saw, he assumed 5 feet wide. You can't assume a width because that totally changes your numbers, okay? So, it's probably not a river. It's probably not a river. So what else can we do with this verse? Well, if you're going to mash out grapes on a wine press, if you put out enough, it's just going to create a big puddle, right? All around your wine press, all right? So let's pretend like this little white dot is your wine press, and going out 1,600 furlongs in all directions is the juice, okay? Now, we know that the height of this volume of blood, of juice, is 5 feet in depth, right? Okay, we have a three-dimensional figure. We can now calculate the volume. What we're going to do is we're going to convert the radians, which in this case is 1,600 furlongs, into Roman feet, and then we're going to use the cylindrical volume of cubic feet equation to figure out what the cubic feet volume is of this mass of blood that's pooled around our wine press, right? Okay. Pi, R is going to be 1,600, well actually, it's 1,600 furlongs in Roman feet, whatever number that is. Let's see. I might actually have that down here somewhere. Roman feet. Oh, I have too many numbers to go through. Anyway, that's what R squared is going to be. It's going to be 1,600 furlongs, 1,600 stadia, converted into Roman feet squared. And the height is going to be 5. You plug those numbers into that equation, you're going to have a cylindrical volume in cubic feet of 444 trillion cubic feet. Now, you assume 5 liters of blood per human being. You divide that 444 trillion by 5, and you're going to have approximately 88 trillion, almost 89 trillion human beings that are contributing to this pool of blood. Okay? Now, here's where some assumptions come in. This is why I had to write a little Perl script to do this, because I wasn't sure about all of these constants. I'm assuming 5 generations per century. Now, I know the current population is 8 billion, something like that. I know that the populations before was less than that, and I know that the populations after this is going to be more than that. So let's just take a snapshot in time and say there's going to be 8 billion people per generation, okay? So we have almost 89 trillion human beings. We're going to have 5 generations per century of 8 billion people per generation. That's going to turn into approximately 11,000 generations of people. You take 11,000 generations converted into centuries, that turns into 2,223 centuries of life. which is a minimum of 222,000 years in order for the number of people it takes to contribute to this 3D volume to live on the earth. Does that make sense? All you're doing is finding out how many liters are in this volume and then figuring out how many people can contribute. It takes to contribute that many liters of blood, okay? But if you look, okay, so 222,000, that number is going to be the time from Adam and Eve until Jesus' second coming. Now, 222,000 is kind of a high number. Premillennialists are preoccupied with searching for the Antichrist. They want to find the Antichrist, and in a survey I saw, up to a third, maybe more, premillennialists think the Antichrist is actually in their lifetime. So they're all preoccupied with trying to find the Antichrist, because the Antichrist is going to lead not only to the end of the world, it's going to lead to Armageddon, which is the end of the world according to premillennialism, but it's going to lead to the 1,000-year reign, and that's their goal. Their goal is to get to the 1,000-year reign. 222,000 is an awful big number. I don't know, it almost seems unrealistic. So let's go back to our verse. Let's take a second look at it, shall we? By the space of 1,600 furlongs. Maybe we have our wine press located at the wrong place. Okay? Before we had our wine press in the center of the pool of blood. Perhaps it is a river of blood that's going to flow that way and create a big pool over there. Okay? So let's try that and see what the numbers turn out to be. So this little white dot on the very left side of the screen is going to be your wine press. This big red blob to the right of that is going to be the river and puddle of liquid going out 1,600 furlongs, 1,600 stadia. So now our diameter is 1,600 furlongs. Not the radius, okay? Our radius is now only 800. We still have our 5 feet high, so we still got our volume. So let's run the numbers on this and see what the numbers come out to be, shall we? Okay, we're going to convert our radians into Roman feet, and then we're going to plug it into the pi r squared h equation to get our cubic feet, our cylindrical cubic feet volume, okay? We do that. Now we're looking at 3 trillion cubic feet of blood. Let's convert the cylindrical volume of cubic feet into liters. You do that, you're going to have about 111 trillion liters. How many humans does it take to contribute that many liters of blood? Well, it takes about 22 trillion humans. We're going back to our same assumption. We're going to assume 5 generations per century at 8 billion people per generation. You do that, you're looking at about 2,779 generations. Convert that to centuries, you're looking at 555 centuries of life that must occur in order for that many lost people to have lived. That equals to about, come back here. I bumped hold it. Okay. That is a minimum of 55,000, almost 60,000 years that must exist, of the earth existing, for that many lost people to actually live on earth. Now, this number is actually going to be higher than 55,000 because you've also got to, this is just for the lost people. You've got to include the people who are going to be saved as well, right? So how many of those are there going to be? Well, we don't know. There is a verse that we'll look at later that says, broad is the way that leads to destruction. Narrow is the way that leads to life. So clearly there's not going to be as many people saved as there are going to be lost based upon that verse. That's the assumption. So we're probably looking at about 60,000 maybe. 60,000 years for the total number of lost people and the total number of saved people to actually have a chance to live on the earth before they die. 60,000, that's a nice round number. It may be 56,000. It may be 57,000. 60,000 is a pretty good round number. That's going to probably include everybody, maybe 65,000. So we're looking at 55,000 at least, maybe 60, 65,000 is how long the earth is going to survive before it's destroyed and the second coming of Jesus occurs. So we're looking at 60 to 65,000 years between the time Adam and Eve were first created and Jesus comes again. How do you like my math? Is that pretty good? You like that? Yes? No? Maybe? They don't like me. I'm going to come over here. How do y'all like my math? You like my math okay? Pretty good. Do you believe it? Oh, come on. Y'all don't believe it? I'm going to go back over here then. Do y'all believe it? Y'all, anyone here believe it? Let me tell you something. This is exactly what premillennialists do every time a number pops up in Revelation. Be ready for it. It happens all the time. This isn't the only explanation that premillennialists have for this verse. They'll use it to figure out how many lost people they're going to be. That's all over the internet. You can find that anywhere. I added the 5 generations and 8 billion because I wanted to see how long it was going to be before Jesus came back. Yeah. Earth is about 8,000 years. I've heard between 5,000 and 20,000. 20,000 is the absolute max. Absolute max. Most people are saying 8 to 10,000 years. Let's assume the worst, okay? Let's assume the worst. Let's assume it's 20,000. That means we're almost halfway there. So the people who are looking for the Antichrist, why are they looking? We've still got, 27, 28,000 years of earth left? Why are they even looking? It's not going to happen for another 30,000 years. There are other people, I have this in my megabytes of notes that I'm not able to cover in 26 weeks. There is another group that claimed that the 1600s somehow, I don't remember how, somehow it prophesies the building of the space station Freedom. Somehow or another, this 1600, along with some other numbers found in the New Testament, calculate something about the orbit of the space station. Whatever the parameters are that go into the orbit of the space station, they say that those numbers equal what it takes to get the space station to orbit around the Earth. Personally, I like that better than the space station. But this is what's going to happen when you start talking to premillennialists. Premillennialists are going to pull this stunt all day long with just about every number they come in contact with in the book of Revelation. Any comment on that? Okay, I love both sides of the room again. Any comment on that? You can find this online. They don't hide it. They put it out there. This 5 generation, from the 5 generations on, is what I added on myself to calculate because I was just curious what the numbers turned out to be. I actually wrote a Perl script so I can go back and maybe eventually take this 8 billion people, and instead of saying a flat 8 billion, maybe we can extrapolate over time, or is that interpolate? Interpolate from the beginning of the time and then extrapolate from this time forward and actually get a more accurate number of people per generation. And that number is actually going to be a better number than this because it's not going to be a constant 8 billion people. Any thoughts on that? You look like deer in headlights. Yeah, you weren't expecting that when you came in the door tonight, did you? We now know when Jesus is going to return to this earth. It's going to be another 30,000 years approximately, according to premillennialists. Because I'm assuming the worst case is 20,000-year-old Earth. And so that means we've had about 22,000 years already. And if we go to 55 or 60,000, we've got another 20. Now, is my math wrong? What's 55 minus 20? 30? Oh, okay, 30. I'm sorry, 35,000 years to go. Okay, my math is off a little bit. Another 35 or 40,000 years. Thank you. Is that more? Is that better? The whole thing is gibberish, okay? The whole thing is gibberish. Okay. Yes, sir. Hey, let me bring this back here so everybody can hear you. Hang on. Yes, sir.
I guess I'd say, so what?
Oh, come on, a party pooper. Who else is going to rain on my parade? You're right. You're absolutely right. Do what? Oh, okay, okay. You're playing number games too. Yeah, I know him. He's an IT guy. They work with numbers all day long. Okay. You're right. Who cares? Exactly. But this is what premillennialists believe. Now, they're probably not going to come up with the exact same numbers I did. They will up until the time of assuming 5 generations per century. Up to that point, their numbers are the same. I just added the extra stuff just because I was curious. But that's what you're going to run into. That's what you're going to see premillennialists claiming. They're going to claim they know when Jesus is going to return. Of course, at the same time, they're saying, well, we're looking for the Antichrist because we think he's going to be here in this generation. I think they've already considered Trump being the Antichrist, Obama being the Antichrist. Any other comments on this? Yeah, I mentioned in an earlier class, I don't know if you were here or heard it, a premillennialist that I encountered one time, we were talking about when Jesus was coming again, and I made the mistake of mentioning, is it Mark 13:35? No one knows except God the Father himself when he's coming again. I did not know until I was talking to him that premillennialists will go with their interpretation of Revelation if their interpretation of Revelation contradicts another verse in the Bible. And the reason is because they say that the Bible was written by human beings and therefore it inherently has errors in it, and God had to come back and write his own book to correct those errors. That's why Revelation chapter 1 verse 1 starts the way it does. The revelation of Jesus Christ given to him by God. Well, basically God wrote that book. And he had to write it because he had to correct some errors that were made earlier. So yeah, you're right. You mentioned that to the premillennialists and they're going to ignore it. Because, well, their reverend, their pastor, their priest, their whatever told them about this. And that's the new interpretation of when Jesus is returning. Because God had to correct that error that was introduced in the Bible by these human writers. I know that doesn't make sense, but that's the reasoning you're going to hear from premillennialists. And you're going to have some way of countering it. Yes, sir. No, because they think in some cases they think that the second coming is going to happen in their generation. That's why they're running all these equations to try to see if it really is that my generation that's going to see it. And a third of them think it is from that survey that I saw. I like those numbers. Do y'all like those numbers? It's pretty neat. Pretty interesting how they will take a verse like that and turn it into something like this. It was a fun little exercise. It took several hours to create all of my graphics and get my program written and get all the constants figured out and all the equations working. It's an interesting little exercise. It's worthless, but it's an interesting exercise anyway. Other claims about 1600. The E-Bible Fellowship, this is a premillennialist group that's online. They claim that the 1600 is actually the number of days it's going to require God to get through judgment. It's going to require 1600 days for God to get through everybody. That's a good question. Probably so, yeah. Because everything is earth-centered to them. Yeah, probably so. Good question. Number of human beings it takes to fill that volume is the number of people that God's going to have to fight when Armageddon occurs. Oh, this is good. I didn't know this one until like 2 days ago. Some premillennialists claim that the 1600 represents 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the White House. And the blood from the wine press is actually abortions. I saw some say that 1600 is actually 40 times 40. And if you will look at the 126 times that the number 40, 146 times that the number 40 appears in the Bible, the vast majority of them represent a time of testing or trial or probation. And therefore 1600 is representative of judgment. Now that makes a little bit more sense than those top ones there or those equations you saw a while ago. That makes a little bit more sense. Now this one's interesting. Check this one out. 1600 stadia is approximately 200 Roman miles, which is the average width of the nation of Italy. So according to some premillennialists, that is who the villain of the book of Revelation is. It's Rome. Because that right there is a representation of the judgment of Italy. You're going to have to point out to a premillennialist their contradiction. If 666 is going to usher in the Antichrist and the end of the world, then how can modern day premillennialists claim that the Antichrist is on his way? Why even search for him? If we know when it's going to happen, why even search? Why does it matter? Good question. The best we can do with this is just to say that 1600 stadia, this wine press, this blood, it's a large number of people entering in at that broad gate. It represents a large number of people who are going to be lost, period, through God's judgment. Above this verse in chapter 14 is God collecting his saints. Towards the end of this chapter is God judging evil. That's different, isn't it? So you can go home and get out your pencil and paper and start writing down all kinds of equations, figuring out all kinds of numbers, and see what you can come up with. Maybe you can come up with something better than 55,000. Maybe you can get something a little more accurate. Any comments on any of this? Yep, it's different, all right. Next week we'll get into the out of context verses. There's 3 verses that we like to quote out of Revelation, but when we do it, we diminish their meaning. Now, their meaning outside of Revelation standalone is probably scriptural. That's okay. But we're still missing some of the actual meaning of these verses. We'll cover those next week. I think we're going to have a bell here in about 2 seconds. Yep, okay. Thank you very much.